Sydney, when I found your content, what stood out to me wasn't just the topic of dating, it was the humanity in how you spoke about it. It felt like you were naming things a lot of people experience but rarely say it out loud. What made you start creating around this?
Well, there are a couple of things that led me to create around this. One, I felt like I had moved through so many struggles in dating, and I saw the transformation in myself in dating from a place of a lot of anxiety and a lot of urgency to moving to a place of dating with much more clarity and groundedness. And also, I found myself, as we were talking about before starting, but just being around friends or groups of people where the topic of dating came up. And I just loved talking about it. Like I would always get so invested in those conversations, um, and then eventually, and I will add, I had a desire to create content for a while, and I always felt like I don't know what I want to create around. Like I don't know what topic I could go in on that I would feel invested enough. And then, I sort of just had this realization of, oh, moving through all of these things, maybe I can challenge myself to articulate those experiences in a way that can help people that were, if I'm here on the path, maybe they're just a little bit behind me. Like I just have moved through a couple more things than someone. And if I can articulate that in a way that that person can understand and relate to, maybe I can help them avoid just a little bit of pain in dating because it can be really painful sometimes with different approaches. So those are the few things that sort of led me to making the content that I'm making now.
I mean, I it's funny how you say that that dating can be somewhat of painful, right? But or at least you say sometimes. But if we're honest, I mean, if we're truly honest, like when we choose to love, we always lose, either breakup or death, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we know the risks, and we go and do it anyway, which is wild, which is wild, right? And and as I was telling you off cameras, and as people know in the podcast I've shared in the past, my whole, by the way, the reason I started the podcast and the career change and transformation, everything came after a divorce, and it was the most painful thing that I've ever gone through. 0 stars. Do not recommend it. But but
Sorry
I
for
will
laughing
say,
at the
no, no,
zero
no, no. Trust
stars.
me. I say with the intention of if a joke will make people laugh, because it's true. It's like you just
Mm.
it's true. It's true. It's that was the intention. So thank you for laughing. Thank you for laughing. But I will say this: I will do it again anyway. I mean,
Mm.
I would just it just. But that's a different story. We can definitely dive deeper into what makes relationships good and bad. But in your own experience, why do you think people struggle so much with dating?
Gosh, I feel like there are a million answers that you could give to that, and all of them would have some bits of truth to them. But I do think, I think one of the big reasons is that everybody really craves and want connection. Like they want to be known by someone, they want to be seen, they want to feel seen. And also, they are so afraid of that. They are so afraid if they are actually seen by someone, they'll be rejected or abandoned or disappointed, or they'll disappoint someone. And I think those are some of the big things. And I think those things hide. Like we cover those things up with sometimes projecting something that's wrong with the other person. Like we focus on some things that we may not like about them, and we use that as an excuse to avoid getting close to them. Um, or, we think, well, are they the person that I want to invest in? Is there someone better over here? And all of those things are really just a way to avoid actually being and getting close to someone. And I mean, I will say there are some people that can just be unhealthy for you to get close to, that can, just reinforce bad patterning. Um, but I think being driven by a fear of those things can just avoid that closeness altogether. And I think that a lot of people avoid that in different ways.
Hmm. One concept or one idea I've been thinking about for a while, and I had to figure this out by observing a lot because it wasn't my own reality. I I experience reality in a different way, like we all do, obviously. But what I found a no-brainer, what I found to be common sense, it wasn't common. And I've always chosen relationships based on intuition and resonance. Even in high school or college, even when I didn't have the language, like okay, like resonance, I just didn't even have that. But I've always been looking for something at a deeper level. Like okay, how do I feel connected intellectually, emotionally, energetically, however you want to call it, but in a sense that when I'm with that person, I feel calm, I feel peace, I feel like home when I'm interacting with that person. And the reason why it took me a while to figure out what other people were experiencing is because at some point I was interacting a lot with a friend who didn't have the capacity and acted as probably the biggest catalyst in my life. You know, painful but worth it, I guess. And and I remember a good friend of mine told me, "What do you feel when you talk to her?" It's like, what do you mean? Do you feel good, bad? It's like I couldn't understand the question. It's like, what do you mean that I wouldn't interact with somebody and then I feel bad about it? It's like I I wouldn't interact with that person to begin with. But those are a lot of patterns that people follow. So at the end of the day, I felt that a lot of people tend to date or tend to chase or pursue out of a place of ego rather than intuition. How am I going to be perceived by the world if I'm with this girl or with this guy? Am I going to be enough? Are people going to perceive me as someone of value? And it tends to be when you're pursuing someone or when you go and trying to have to build something with someone from a place of ego, those things don't tend to last long. And and sure, it doesn't mean that if you're going from a place of alignment and from a place of intuition, they will last forever. Because my marriage was like that. We clicked, we connected, we were just, it was the most fulfilling relationship I've ever had. And it came to an end by a death by a thousand cuts that it was too late and we just couldn't save it. But what I've told people is like, you need to just try to tap more inwards, and I don't know if they have the capacity or the awareness to do so.
I think it's really hard to date from a place of intuition. And I think it's a skill that's built over time because so many people, because in dating, as we were talking about too, there's a lot of fear in it. And I think, and I know this was true for me and perhaps still is in some ways, because I think learning to trust ourselves and listen to our intuition is a skill that's built over time. And some people are better at it than others, or, you know, some people have a longer way to go to build that skill. However, I think that sometimes fear can feel like intuition. Some people feel fear about something and they mistake that for being their intuition. Um, and it's really hard in dating because there's so many emotions and patterns involved in dating, and it's you know, patterns from our childhood, what we grew up with, the love that we're used to, the love that we've received, the care that we've received, all of that gets tied in, and also the relationships that we've had over time. All of that gets tied into how we show up in the world now and how we show up with our current partners now, or if we're in the dating scene. Um, and so there's just so many factors. And I feel like the more emotions that are involved in things, the harder it is to find the logic in it and to like separate from those emotions. And like relationships they're emotional things, right? And when people are bringing so many things into a relationship, it's it's it can be so hard because those emotions mask the logic. And then like I don't they're I'm thinking specifically now about some of the content that I've made around dating people who are more avoidant or who end a connection that seems really great because of some reason. You know, like one of the reasons that I've gotten one of the reasons that I've gotten is like being in a new city now. Oh, I feel like I'm going to stop you from making friends if we're dating, and I'm like, you know, it's just something that I feel like there could be a conversation around. Like if you feel like that's happening, or if I feel like that's happening, we just talk about it and like get to a different place. But like people use that as a reason to like step away from a connection, and that just doesn't seem logical sometimes. So it can be really hard um, to understand it from the other side because there are those emotions involved in it when we want to make sense of it logically, and sometimes that just can't happen.
I can relate, and I can relate. And we're messy humans, and we're messy beings. We're messy, messy beings. And yeah, I think that I don't know if you're talking about the same one, but one content that comes to mind. I don't remember much what you were talking about, but I think it was a lot around capacity, right? That many times the connection can be there, the the attraction, the good feelings and the emotions and all that, and yet it seems, especially for dismissive avoidance is one, but I think most for those who have disorganized attachment or fearful avoidance, however you want to call it, it's like either or, it's the same thing but with different names, is the fact that when it comes to capacity, it's invisible until tested. You,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that if you as the receiving end of that pain, you could not foresee the capacity and the other person either. And I have a couple of friends who are dismissive avoidant, and honestly, it brings a lot of pain to me. It just as somebody who loves them as a friend, because I can tell that a lot of them really like really want connection, really want to connect, really want to have, and at the same time, are deeply afraid of that. And they're battling. They have this internal battle with their nervous system in terms of yes, I want, but no, it's just way too scary in a way. Now they can make sense of it, but from outside looking in, I'm not in their body, they're experiencing it, but from outside looking in, I can see how they're almost consumed by it. And to me, it's kind of sad because I've always been driven by connection, by deep connection. And I cannot imagine myself being in a position when I truly want it. I'm longing it, I'm yearning it, and yet I'm deeply terrified of it. And it's a painful place to be for all parties, honestly.
It really is, and that fear masks itself, right? Like it's not often it's not clear to the person that's experiencing that what they're really afraid of is connection. They're like, oh no, it's something about this person. There's something off about this connection. It just can't be right. You know, I gotta go find somebody else. And then it's not until afterwards they realize that perhaps they realize that that connection was actually really good. Like in the moment, they just felt very overwhelmed. That came out as nitpicking about this person, finding things wrong with them, and then leaving the connection. And then afterwards, once that, pressure that they may have felt to have a connection with somebody subsides, then they're like, oh, wait, no, that was actually like really, that was a really good connection. What did I do there? And and, and I think it's important to have compassion for those people too, because a lot of that is just driven by their own experiences and their own fears of abandonment or fears of disappointing someone and that sort of thing. And I think it's easy to make an enemy out of people who are avoidant, especially when we've experienced that. And I think it's important to have compassion, and that also doesn't mean that their behavior is okay. Like we can we can understand their behavior and also be like, well, it's also not okay to treat people in that way. I can have compassion for you, and also maybe there's some work to be done there to treat people a little bit kinder in the future, whether that was their intention or not to be unkind. Yeah.
100%. I 100% agree with you. And you said a couple things that are very true. And I'm glad that you brought them up. One of them is yes, we should have compassion for them. There's a lot of things that they cannot control. Is I've since I was a kid, I became obsessed with why people behave in a certain way. I able to see patterns and trying to go deeper. It's like I don't go with the surface level reason or excuse of why people behave in a certain way. Imagine, hypothetically speaking, you're dating somebody who is avoidant, or you're talking to somebody who's avoidant, and one day they're loving and they're just, you're the best person in the world to them, and the next day, dry, cold. In fact, you don't even hear from them. Some people might think, okay, they're playing games, and I'm not playing games. They're trying to make themselves look like hard to get or something like that, or maybe they were just playing with me and they don't care and they just wanted to get, maybe to sleep with me or whatever the case may be. But in more cases than not, there's always something deeper. And I like to use this metaphor that how, and this is not only for dating, I think this is for almost every aspect of life when it comes to interacting with other people. What happens a lot, imagine, Sydney, that you have a, let's say, 500 pieces puzzle on your table, and you see, but you don't have the image of how the puzzle looks like. So you see a couple of yellow pieces and say, oh, you know what? I'm going to start putting, okay, to me, that's the sun. So if these yellow pieces are the sun, then I need to find the light blues for the sky, maybe the green for the grass. And you start looking for the pieces, but you only see reds, oranges, blacks, and grays, and all of that. And you say, okay, this is the wrong puzzle. It's like, clearly there's a sun here, but I have the wrong pieces. Then later, the image is shown to you, and those yellow pieces were part of a billboard in Times Square. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because we already create a story of what one or two behaviors said about the entire person, rather than accumulate as many pieces as possible and trying to really understand exactly and create a whole image, which will never have a whole image of a person. In fact, we will never have our own image of ourselves. There are parts of ourselves that are always going to be unconscious, but I think people tend to rush to conclusions and to be harsh on others just because they are in pain. But as you said, that we can understand, and there's a very fine line between understanding and being compassionate towards another person, while at the same time join a boundary so we don't abandon ourselves. So it gets tricky, because one thing I've done is like, I've, the more I understand, the more I empathize with a person, I tend to be more loose in terms of my emotional boundaries, and it's sometimes hard because, okay, but I understand it. I don't have to take it personally and stuff.
It's really tough. Like being an empathetic person, especially in dating, is so hard because you can see, once you know things about someone, and when you do have that, just that ability to go just a little bit deeper. You're not just looking at the surface level behavior. You're like, oh, well, this person told me this thing about them or their childhood and this hard thing that they experienced. And I can see how that is now creating this behavior in them. And you empathize with that. Like if you're a person that's been through a lot of painful experiences and you've, done some work to unpack those and understand those, then you recognize the pain in other people. And it's so hard. I've struggled with this for so long of, setting that line of I can empathize with you. And also, if I continue to tolerate this behavior, I'm going to be abandoning myself. And I feel like it takes practice to get to that point, depending on who you are and what you've been through. And I think it's also so important for finding somebody that will actually like uplift and add to your life. Like I think being in relationships with other people, especially romantic relationships, like they're always going to bring up triggers. Like I don't think it's realistic to be like this experience is always going to be peaceful. Like my peace is never going to be disturbed with this person. Like that's not how it works. Like relationships bring up triggers for you to work through. And is it in a way that's beneficial for your growth? Like those painful experiences, those triggers, like the things you're going through in that relationship, is that helping you grow and move through things? Is this person a safe person to do that with? Or are you just abandoning yourself trying to help someone else heal their own patterning? Um, and it's a fine
I
line. It takes practice to get there. It takes a lot of self-reflection and self-understanding. And I'm not going to pretend that I am completely an expert at this. I'm not, but I do know that this is something that I've struggled with, and it's something that I've gotten better at. Like I've gotten better at not abandoning myself for someone else.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. And while you were telling the story, I remember myself like I would hit the same wall over and over again until my stubborn brain understood. Okay, let's just figure this out because we cannot keep hitting the same wall. And I think that's kind of part of life, as you said. Triggers to me are gifts
Mm.
that reveal to us where we're still not free, things that we need to work on. And I rarely get triggered by other people in terms of friends or coworkers or things like that. I if somebody says something or something happens, like I rarely get triggered. In relationship, that's a different story because we're talking about attachment, we're talking about belonging, we're talking about abandonment and love and all that. But I will say it's like life will. I want to say the life will test you, but it would put you in situation for you to learn a lesson. And many of us, it takes a while to learn the lesson, and this is something that becoming aware of, and it true to me, which I don't know if it's true for everyone else. What I come to realize, thanks to these wonderful, painful experiences, right, is is that our capacity to grow is directly tied to how much truth we can face about ourselves without running.
Mm.
And I believe that many of us, for a long time, we run in terms of we numb, we distract, we get into busyness and productivity. Just facing our own truth can be painful, more than uncomfortable, because people might say it, be comfortable by being uncomfortable. But it's not even the discomfort that is hard, it's the pain, it's the existential pain to face those truths. But the only way out is through. And to go through that is something that is hard, and you have to go through experience. And for the experience that you were talking about, I think that is something that is very painful when two people can genuinely matter to each other and still not choose the same future. Because I think this is one of the adults hardest truth, like a love potential, like we all imagine, especially at the beginning when we start connecting with someone, when we start talking or dating or whatnot, is usually not enough because it requires timing, it requires capacity, and especially attachment readiness must align. So you need all those three. You might have the attachment readiness, but no timing, or you might have timing, attachment readiness, but not the capacity. So all of these three need to need to align with somebody that you feel resonance with and you align with, and still they're going to have some growing pains because any kind of partnership, even when you're living with roommates, if you live with roommates or even if you have coworkers or friends, you have to, I mean, we're two different human beings, two nervous systems that we're going to trigger each other. So that work needs to be embraced rather than avoided.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I and I know I've heard from people that they feel like people are so quick to leave, like at the first sign of discomfort or mismatch, or they discover something that's maybe a little bit undesirable about this person. I have heard from people that they feel like in dating, people are just quick to write people off. They're like, oh, nope, we're not going to work through that, or I'm not going to stick around for that. And I do think that there's a fine line in that because people are imperfect. Like nobody is perfect. We're all bringing our own things to relationships and to dating. And there can be a fine line of, well, this person is imperfect, but that's not a deal breaker. We still align on all of these other things. And I want to see where this can go versus, no, that's actually like a non-negotiable for me. I don't see this connection working out. And I think that that line gets blurred. And I think that people have maybe like some silly preferences in dating that will keep them detached from other people or keep them investing in somebody else. Um, and yeah, I think, and I think that's part of what makes it so hard because we have to have compassion for those things and understanding and a willingness to stick through maybe the more undesirable parts of somebody else. And also, like, I also don't think that we find the perfect person for us. That's built over time through understanding, through shared experiences, through communication, understanding each other a little bit better. Um, So yeah, there's so much wrapped up in this, and I find sometimes it's difficult to talk about because there are all these nuances that like fire off in my brain, and sometimes it's hard to like bring it all to one like connecting point because there are just so many things that go into love and attachment and dating. Um, but I do think it's something that people really seem to be struggling with, and people do seem in the dating world and finding a partner. A lot of people do seem to be really dissatisfied, and find it to be very hard and are unsure about how to approach certain things. And so I think the more conversations we can have around it, the more people can hear perspectives that resonate with them, that might help them through something. So, um, yeah, I think having conversations around it just in general can be really, really beneficial.
Hmm. Are you familiar? By the way, I love how your brain works. I do. So all I guess my brain works in the same way, just crazy ideas, and every now and then I'm like, you know what, screw it. I'm not gonna just try to be precise. I'm just gonna boom, just dump in and figure it out, right? But are you familiar with Alain de Botton by any chance?
Is that a name?
Yes, he's an English philosopher. If not, I'll have to send you a couple of videos afterwards. You must watch this guy. This guy is just like incredibly amount of wisdom. But he has a line that says, and I'll tie it to what you said. He said, "The catastrophe we fear that might happen has already happened, but we have forgotten that it happened and it belongs to the past. So we keep projecting forward, and we keep running away from it. So basically, many times people say that I don't want anybody to disrupt my peace, or things like, well, all women are for the streets, or men cannot commit, or whatever
Mm-hmm.
storyline, or whatever excuse that people come up on social media is, you might have got burned once or twice, but because you haven't healed and you haven't overcome that past, your brain is projecting that fear forward, and you have forgotten that, okay, no, that's a different person, that's a different story, you don't even know. And we tend to walk away from it, or to prevent from truly committing, in terms of not necessarily like, okay, we're dating, we're serious, no, but in terms of really exploring that. And I remember being with a group of friends, and I don't know, some of them, one of them was talking about this famous person I've never heard of, and I don't even remember their name, but they were talking how this guy and his partner or wife or whatever live, I mean, in the same house, obviously, but they sleep in different rooms. And to me, it's like, what's even the point then? I mean, just I don't understand. So, well, I mean, actually makes sense if you want your own space, and you want and you want your own, just no one to mess up with it, with your yeah, I guess, space. And in my mind, it's like, why having a relationship then? I mean, it's not that you're both going to be messy, but you have to compromise. Living in two different, sleeping in two different rooms, or that's just roommates. You're just roommates with benefits, I guess. But is the unwillingness to compromise, the unwillingness to just say, hey, let's work this out. And I don't know what your dating philosophy is and all of that, but something that I've been sharing more and more with some friends, like a hill that I'll die on. And I've been, some of them agree with me, a lot of them don't necessarily, is that for to Daniel, and this is for everyone who's listening, to Daniel, I'm not saying that this is the right way to do it, it's my way, is that friends before lovers make the best relationships.
Mm-hmm.
In a way that once you establish some sort of rapport and connection, and I'm not saying become friends to then eventually hope to get somewhere. No, get to know the person, connect with the person, build that level of trust and safety. And if there's something to explore, then you have a higher chance of being successful, because you have already created a level of safety that if some inconveniences would come into play, then you have a higher chance of working through them, rather than saying, you know what, I'm out. It's not something
Hmm.
that I want to deal with, because now you are investing more in the person. One, and two, you know their intentions because you know them better. But that's just me.
Yes. Okay, a couple of thoughts that came up as you were talking that I'm just trying to keep in my brain, so we'll see how I did here. But when you were talking about, people projecting their past into the future and using experiences in the past to avoid things in the future, I think that is so true. And I think one thing that people would really benefit from tapping into, and I know this is true for me, is their ability to trust themselves to get through hard experiences. Like the times that I have found myself developing feelings for someone or growing a connection and dating with someone, it is scary. And I tell myself, you know what? What's the benefit of not being as much in all into this person as I can be? I don't want to just ignore things and completely dive into someone. And also, how much can I let my feelings grow and, put away the fear of what if this doesn't work out and just trust if it doesn't work out, it's going to be okay. I'm going to be able to be there for myself, catch myself. I've been through hard things before. There's always something wonderful on the other side of them once you work through that pain. So I think that's one. Like people need to tap into a little bit more just trust in themselves to get through the hard things, and they have evidence that they can because we've all been through hard things before, and we're all still alive. Hopefully, the people that
Yes.
are listening to this have been through hard things and are now still alive. And the second part of that, being friends with someone first, this is something I've been thinking a lot about, and so you might see a video from me on this soon. I think that there is so much benefit to that, and um, especially not only just to develop a rapport with someone that can then benefit a romantic connection, but also, is this someone that is trustworthy? And I'm thinking about people who may meet off of dating apps. They don't know this person, they have no mutual friends, they don't know anybody that knows this person. And I think there's a lot of benefit to just seeing how someone shows up over time, seeing what their character is. Are they someone that's just trying to get something quick out of you and they're going to leave once they get what they want? Or are they someone that's actually invested in a future that has the same values and goals that you have, that's going to show up and be consistent? And I think being friends with someone first, even in a dating app scenario, I think it's less likely in that. And I think people can still approach that with intentionality. Just being able to see how someone shows up over time can be really telling. And I know there are people in my life where I'm like, oh, I'm kind of interested in them, but you know what? Let's just be friends for a little while. Let me just observe how they show up. Like, I don't need to rush into a romantic connection with someone. And I have been really glad that I have done that, because then I've seen things about that person. It's like, oh, that's not compatible with me and what I want. I'm so glad that I didn't have a romantic connection with this person, because once we do develop that, when it moves from friendship to romance, then we can put on our rose colored glasses, ignore red flags, ignore yellow flags, and then perhaps get a little bit more attached to someone than maybe we would have if we had stuck in that sort of friendship zone and just been observing them. Because, once things progress, there's more emotions involved, the attachment system gets involved, which can happen with friends too. But obviously, I think it's more intense when a romantic connection develops. So I think that there is so much benefit to just being friends with people first. And that can be really hard because I do think people date with a lot of urgency. Um, and so they're like, oh, I just want to, dive into this connection, and I don't have time to be friends with somebody, or, you know, that sort of thing.
I love everything that you said. And the last point, and I'm going to go then backwards. But the last point you made in terms of, well, I don't have time to deal with it. This applies for business and applies as well, it seems, for dating. It's like the a slow way is a fast way because it's the only way. If you're trying to rush things, you might waste more time going through the wrong people than if you wait until develops. Hey, let's see, how this plays out. And for me, for friends, and this is funny. I was interviewing a dating coach, I think last year, and I said to her, it's like, well, first of all, I've never will use dating apps. Like, it just, to me, it doesn't make any sense. And because, once again, I'm more connection driven, and I feel that if two people, well, I know that some people have made their love of their life and they're getting married. I get all that, but the statistics are that more people suffer than, I mean, it's like wildly unbalanced. But I'll say this: what it never made sense to me was two people that don't know each other go on a first date. Now, immediately, right from the get go, it's somewhat performative because you're nervous, you're kind of awkward, you don't even know. It, to me, it's like you have a DJ board and you're adjusting the levers and see exactly how to mold yourself to some capacity for that first impression. But also, I think creates a high stakes because now people are not giving others, based on what I'm hearing, a second chance for a second date or third date. Well, I just didn't feel it. Well, how is you supposed to feel it when you are really activated and nervous and you're trying to make things go right, and then you think to yourself, at least from the guy's point of view, my understanding, well, I need to create some sort of romantic chemistry or some sexual tension on this and that. Brother, that is way too much pressure for a first encounter. So to me, that's why dating apps were never my go-to. But I was interviewing this dating coach last year, and I said I like to become friends first. Now I'm drawn to people, right? I'm drawn to people, and to me, it's like, okay, let me explore. And even if I quote unquote end up in the friend zone, to me, to Daniel, that means that I was never meant to be with a person. Period. And I value the connection, but I go with the intention of I value the friendship and the connection. And if it by any chance turns into something else, awesome. But if not, it's okay. It's funny because some people say, well, men and women cannot be friends. Maybe for a lot of guys, they cannot. But a story I share with some of my friends is that back in college, I had this friend of mine that were there was kind of we were kind of into each other, but she was just getting out of a long term relationship. I was waiting some time, and at the end, timing wasn't right. She started dating somebody else, and but I really enjoyed that connection and that friendship. And to this day, we've been friends for over 15 years. It's one of my closest friends. She's been with somebody for like over 10 years and all that. But to me, because of that, it's like not dating her at that point in my life led me eventually to meet my ex-wife, and that was a different story. So when a connection doesn't happen, when you explore things friendship wise, and then you end up in the friend zone, or you end up being hurt because the person doesn't have the same feelings. If you went with intention of creating that friendship, with intention of, okay, I like this girl, I really want to date her, let me be friends with her, and then go for it, it's probably not going to work out. But if you go with intention, hey, I I love being around this person, and yes, I would love to, build something with this person. But if not possible, then at least that connection is still alive, and it can be still very fulfilling, even though might not escalate into romance.
Yeah, I love that approach. And what I'm hearing and what you're saying too is that people need to have a tolerance for rejection in order to have that happen. Like if people are going into a connection wanting something more to develop without that understanding of, let's just let this be what it is. If it's just friends, great. This person is amazing. A lot of people go into it wanting more than that. And if it doesn't turn into more than that, then they feel rejected, and then they may even project that onto the other person. Well, they weren't into me. They're whatever their thoughts may be. So I do think part of that is developing that tolerance for rejection. I think your approach to that is great. Just going in with the intention of connection. It doesn't have to be friends or more than friends. Let's just connect with this person and have a fulfilling experience. And I think a lot of people aren't able to do that because if they want something more and they don't get that, then they feel rejected, and they haven't quite developed the tolerance or even sort of the perspective around that. Because I agree with you, if something doesn't develop with someone, well, that just wasn't the person for you. Um, but a lot of people make that mean something about themselves, and um, and I think that can make connection hard. If you hold resentment towards someone for not feeling something for you back. If you're resentful towards someone, you're not going to have a great connection with them. And I think that just comes down to like what you said, just the approach of being friends versus more than friends, and being okay with either one of those outcomes. I don't think that's necessarily common among people, if I'm being honest. I don't, at least in what I observe.
Nope, it's not. That's why when I said earlier, it's like my inner reality didn't match a lot of what I experienced outside of what other people were experiencing. I just couldn't wrap my head around it. And for many years, and this since I was a kid, when 9 out of 10 people think in a particular way, and you maybe another person think differently or feel differently, or your inner world is kind of different, then you start thinking it's like, well, maybe I'm wrong. Because I mean, if 9 out of 10 think this way, then that must be right. And then you grow up with that belief that okay, that's the way of doing things, no my way, even though it feels your way feels more aligned than what other people experience. And it took me a long time to realize, actually I'm starting to believe that it's not that my way is the right way, but my way is the right way for me. And I don't have to just follow what other people do. Sure, I've been told that my approach is not good. By the way, that's another thing, that I'm not going out there and shooting my shot and asking girls for numbers. I just it's not how I approach things. I'm part of social groups, and if it happens to be someone who I might be attracted to, and if it happens to be that we start creating a connection and friendship, and I see that okay, based on my own internal state, based on the possibility I see, okay, let me explore that. Now it happens very rare. I haven't through like dated since I got divorced, because it took me like almost 2 years to really, a year and a half to really grieve and get better. Because besides that, I went to deep depression, and another half a year to say, okay, now things are more stable. But since then, I've only met like two people that, hey, I really think that this could go somewhere. One, lack of capacity. The other one, bad timing. But even my parents or my friends like, well, you should go out and ask girls for numbers. Like, yeah, no, but for a lot of girls, I think maybe because especially they feel that they want to finally find their person. Hypothetically speaking, maybe that's a limiting belief of mine. Perhaps a story that I'm telling myself. Hypothetically speaking, I see somebody at the park, or see somebody at the bookstore, or see somebody at the grocery store or a bar, anything, and I find her attractive. I go ask for a number immediately. I should text her, just schedule like a coffee date or something along those lines. But now we are going with intention. Like, okay, well, this is a date, so if I don't feel anything, so there's no room for, well, let's explore if maybe a friendship could be there. Because a lot of people say, well, I don't have time for friendship. Brother, we are humans. We are social species. I mean, a connection, if it's a cool connection, should be always welcome. And I just follow my model. I'm kind of the person, and this is what I see a lot of people do, is that it's almost like they have an AK-47 shooting at everything. I'm not into guns, but that's the only metaphor that comes to mind. Shoot a lot of things. They just might kill a small bird, which is not enough for them to feed themselves, or to a trash can or something along those lines. I'm somebody with a sniper that I can sit there, right? Do I feel the longing and the yearning and the need for companionship, especially after going through a relationship that was deeply fulfilling? Absolutely. But once you experience deep, fulfilling relationships, you know that you cannot go back to anything less than that. And it's not that I'm looking for the replacement of that person. I know the connection is going to look a lot different, but the resonance and the feeling will be very similar. So I'm okay being there, waiting until somebody will cross my path. As I made a comment, I think your post yesterday or 2 days before, about how some people will cross our path just to act as a catalyst and to reveal
Mm.
to us where we're not free. It happened to me recently. This good friend of mine, there's definitely that attraction, that connection, that all of it. probably lack of capacity, but has been by far, I mean, Sydney, by far the biggest catalyst. Painful as hell, but
Mhm.
and this person doesn't even is not even aware of everything that has been revealed to me, things from 20 years ago, 25 years ago, that were activated because of her. One of them is the fear of not being chosen. Another one is a fear like I don't want to desire, because if I desire, then I'll lose. And desire not necessarily in a lustful or sexual way, but desiring of that connection, like true, like I want to believe and desire that something is possible, but hope, or real hope at that point of desiring, activates vulnerability more than fear, because hope is biologically activating and it opens our attachment circuitries. So it's painful, it's vulnerable, but it's the only way to, for me, to truly experience life.
I agree. Like anytime I'm going through something really hard or I'm feeling a really like a lot of what we associate to be like really negative emotions or, feeling very emotional about something, sometimes, not always, sometimes it just sucks, but sometimes I'm also able to be like, honestly, it's really beautiful that I can experience an emotion this deeply. And like, what would joy be if we didn't experience pain? Like, would there be any joy if we didn't feel the opposite side of that? No, because that would just be what we always felt, and then it would just be normal. So, like, there's that contrast that it gives, and totally like going through a painful breakup, heartbreak, painful experiences. I mean, have you ever been through a really difficult heartbreak where you haven't like grown from it, learned something about yourself, and at times been a catalyst for something amazing to happen in your life? So I think that goes back to trusting ourselves, like allow yourself to develop feelings, to go through hard things. I mean, don't put yourself in like unnecessary risk. Like don't go all in on someone where you see some red flags right off the bat with them or whatever, but like be willing to make a calculated choice to go in on someone to maybe experience something hard or painful and trust you're going to get through it, you're going to grow from it, or maybe you'll develop an amazing lasting connection with someone and it will actually be the thing. And going back to what you're saying about friendships and people being unwilling to just let a friendship develop, and they want something right off the bat, and they're aiming for everything. I think I think like something that I've realized, so I'm from the Northeast and I recently moved to Tennessee, moved to the South, and there's such a different sense in community in those two different places. And we could theorize, for days over what creates that. But one thing that I've really appreciated about being in the South, I think there's a greater sense of community here. And I think with that, people have more of a tolerance to put up with inconveniences, right? Because there's inconveniences in community sometimes. Like you have to make sacrifices to have that community, to show up for people, like to do things for people and then have them do things for you. Like sometimes you have to make sacrifices in that and also go in with a lot of intentionality. There are a lot of different groups that I'm a part of. There's so many times where I'm like, I would rather just sit at home and watch something and be lazy. And I'm like, no, I know that showing up to this thing, being around these people, like that's what's important for me long term, being a consistent person who shows up and builds these connections over time. And that means I have to put up with the inconvenience of not doing what I want to do, which is sitting at home and going out and like building connections with people and continuing to show up and have the intentionality. And I think that makes a huge difference. And I've lived in places before where there hasn't been a great sense of community. And so I empathize with people who maybe live in a place like that. And they're like, well, I don't have these groups that I can go to. They just don't really exist in my community. There's just not that going on. But I think if you're someone that lives in a place where there is a lot going on, or if you live in a place where there's not so much going on, you have to be a lot more intentional about finding the spaces where there is. Like, where can you go out and get into? And I think that so beneficial and allowing connections to develop over time. You meet people, maybe there's someone you're attracted to or interested in. It doesn't have to, you don't have to ask for their number right away. Keep showing up. Keep showing up to that space. Keep seeing them. Keep building something. Build that friendship. Just be there over time and like plant those seeds, and then let them grow and see what comes of them. People just want that like instant gratification, like, oh, she's attractive, he's attractive. I want their number. Let's go on a date. Rather than like, you know what? Let me just keep showing up. Let me keep showing up to where they're at and just see what happens. Get to know them better over time. I do think there's so much benefit in being friends with people first, or just knowing people casually, or being in the same space over time. I think that the more that people can invest in being intentional about that, there's a lot of dividends that pay off. So, like put away the TV, the Netflix for a night. I get that. I am such a homebody. I can be so introverted. I love being at home. But I do think that like connection brings a lot of meaning to life. It's really boring when you're just by yourself all the time. You're always learning new things about yourself or about people through that connection. And the more opportunities you can create to have that, I think sort of the better off we all are, honestly.
I literally love everything that you said, and I can relate a lot to that. I am homebody as well. For a lot of years, I thought I was definitely shy, introverted with social anxiety, and things change, and I'm wired for deep connections. I don't know, just it's just what I'm seeking all the time. And unless you're asking me to go partying, which is like, no, thank you, I'm good. But if you're inviting me to whatever event or pickleball or walk or run or whatever, just probably 9 times out of 10, I'm gonna say yes. Because if the person that is inviting me, I connect with the person, whether it's a guy or a girl, it's like, okay, at least I'm gonna enjoy that company, right? Rather than if I have to bring myself to go an event by myself, chances are probably I won't go. But yeah, chances are probably it won't go. However, I will say this, even though I've said that I haven't been on a proper date since I got divorced. I went to three different speed dating events, not with the intention of finding somebody, but when I was baffled, not understanding exactly what was going on, I was okay. I need to just ask all of these people what's going on, right? So I was just so my 5 minute
Went to
conversation with this,
research.
yeah, I was like, what is going on? It's like I was like, I would tell this girl, help me understand this place. Help me understand. Oh, it's all a mess. It's, like nobody's approaching, nobody's doing this, nobody's doing that. The dating apps, but the dating apps suck. It's like, well, have you tried meet people other social settings? No. So I was like, okay. But I had the opportunity to talk with men before the event began and with the women during the event. And I was like, okay, clearly, I think people have built bad habits. We can definitely talk about that later. But yes, to me is I'm always trying to say yes to things, not because I feel okay. I run a lot. Well, I used to run more now. After a few injuries, I'm not running as much, but I love running by myself. Like I love running by myself. And I started joining a run club, not because I wanted to find the love of my life, but it's like I need more connections, especially because I have to rebuild my life after my divorce. And I found like 3 or 4 amazing connections that I'm very good friends with through run club. And I joined Toastmasters, which is a public speaking thing, and I developed deep connections, like very fulfilling friendships as well. But I never joined those places with intention of, okay, my goal is to find someone, because I do believe, especially how run clubs became the new dating app. It's like people say, oh, I'm going to go to a run club. I might not enjoy running, but I'm going to go because maybe I'll find my person. I said, well, that's not how it works, but you do you. And the other thing that you mentioned that I love, and I think that I messaged you because that is something that I want to talk about, and I'm glad that you brought it up, was the self trust. Is I think that for everything in life, if you want to be vulnerable, if you want to be confident, if you want to be a good leader, if you want to be a good friend, you need to trust yourself. And what we the mistake we make is to believing that trusting ourselves is knowing how we're going to do things. It's not trusting that we can handle whatever happens. That if we look back at our life, we have overcome 100% of our worst days. We're still
Hmm.
here, so we're undefeated. But we forget that, and when we
Hmm.
forget that, we go with this instead of thinking, oh, a new challenge comes, whether it's the fear of approaching somebody or asking somebody out, or killing ambiguity, which is tricky because ambiguity keeps you safe, but at the same time it drains all your energy. When we face those challenges, then we're not thinking, oh yeah, I've gone through worse. We're thinking, how am I going to get through it, without even realizing, hey, I've always been able to pick myself up and and walk through it. For you, at least in your own experience, what has helped you develop that self trust that it seems to be very rare nowadays?
Oh gosh, what has helped me develop self-trust? I mean, honestly, going through situations where I didn't trust myself, where I didn't listen to my own instincts, listen to my body, and overrode or dismissed my own intuitive feelings that I didn't interpret as being intuitive feelings, and then coming out on the other side of it being like, fuck, I wish I had listened to that voice. Because if I had listened to that voice, maybe I wouldn't have avoided all of this pain, but I would have been able to see it more clearly. So I think what helped me develop self-trust was not trusting myself and then being proven wrong. And and like we talked about at the beginning of this, fear, sometimes we can confuse fear with intuition. And so and when you're developing the skill of self trust, or you're developing the skill of listening to your intuition, I think it starts with just not dismissing the way that you feel. Like, you don't have to make conclusions about things based off of a feeling that you have in your body, or a thought that came to you that you're like, I don't know if that's fear or if that's intuition. You don't necessarily have to make conclusions about those things, but I do think it's really important not to dismiss them. So that can just be like, that person said something and I felt the type of way about it. I don't know exactly what that feeling was, but let me just keep that in the back of my mind. I'm just going to remember that I felt that way, and then see how things develop or what patterns may come up. And then, so rather than being what I've done a lot, and coming back to your question, what helped me develop self-trust is having a ping, having something come up and being like, no, that can't be right. And then later on being like, that was 100% right. And so now it's just, you might not always know what it means, what that feeling says. So I think it begins with just not dismissing it, letting it exist, letting it be there, and also being willing and able to continue to see and to focus on patterns. Because what you mentioned ambiguity, you know, coming as someone who's been very anxious in dating and relationships in the past, and I think maybe that's something that's sort of always a work in progress to get through. um, there are lots of things that can set someone off that might be anxious in a relationship that might be completely benign. However, I think the danger in that is people will be like, "Oh, that's just my own thing." Like, they didn't text back when they said they were going to text back, and that had a ping, but like I must just be wrong about that. And then that becomes a pattern. Like, they say they're going to text or they say they're going to call and they don't, and then we keep dismissing it rather than acknowledging one time, okay, let's talk ourselves out of it. Let's bring, like, what are some other scenarios that happened here? Maybe they got caught up, whatever may have happened. One time, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. But if it keeps happening over and over, we need to learn to not dismiss, like, oh no, that's just my own thing to deal with. It's like, no, now there's a pattern of them saying they're going to do something, they say they're going to text whatever, and then they don't. And then you feel that ambiguity in your body. Like, we feel that. Sometimes it's our own fear. We need to have the benefit of the doubt. And sometimes it's a pattern in that person, and it's actually telling us something about their intentions or where their feelings are at. And it's so important to not dismiss that. So you need to leave room for it to be a one-off scenario, to be able to observe if it's a pattern over time. And then once you recognize that pattern, to have, I don't exactly know what it is, bravery, resolve,
Courage.
ask, courage to ask about it, and to be okay with maybe hearing some bad news. Or I think the more dangerous part, and maybe you had even said this in a comment, someone says, no, I feel totally fine, I'm still really into this. But in your body, you feel, oh, I'm still feeling like ambiguity from them. They say everything's fine, but I still feel really anxious. I think that's worth listening to. Like, our bodies pick up on things. faster than our brains will. And sometimes it's fear based, sometimes it's intuition based. And just not dismissing it, noticing those patterns over time, I think can help people develop that self trust and perhaps avoid situations that could be more painful down the line.
What's up, guys? That was the end of part one of my amazing conversation with Sydney. Stay tuned for part two on my next episode. We're diving deeper into self trust around dating, why we are attracted to unavailable partners, and how we can heal so we can finally find healthy love. Stay tuned.